Both said that they would cut aid to Ukraine. That's why I'm reporting from New York that we are for this one.
The chief of Russia's Wagner Group is dead. The fatal plane crash that resulted in Yevgeny Prigozhin's death has now become the center of West allegations against the Russian president. But Russia has refuted all these theories. So the question, of course, is, was there a bomb on the plane? Was the incident actually a revenge by Vladimir Putin against the Wagner chief? Was Prigozhin living essentially at borrowed time ever since the meeting? These are questions that are all at this moment unresolved. But at the makeshift Wagner Group Memorial in St. Petersburg, people paid their tributes to the Wagner chief. Flowers were laid and candles were lit. Prigozhin's death will, of course, leave the Wagner Group virtually headless for the moment.
Считаю долгом почтить память погибших в авиакатастрофе, считаю долгом почтить память своего земляка, героя России, великого Пригожина. Человек очень достойный, человек очень много сделал для имиджа России, для успеха футболя СВО. Поэтому я здесь сегодня. Такой Господи его.
Отразился не только на эффективности, но и на всем, в том числе личные контакты Пригожина и командиров, которые они в Африке присутствовали. Новые контакты наложить, получится ли так же или в той же мере, это вопрос.
Western politicians and commentators have suggested, without evidence, that Prigozhin was assassinated on Moscow's orders. Prigozhin's failed mission, exactly 2 months before the crash, was the biggest challenge to President Vladimir Putin's rule as he came to power in 1999. But speaking on Friday, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said allegations that Russia gave an order to kill him were a complete lie.
There is now great speculation surrounding this plane crash and the tragic deaths of the plane's passengers, including Yevgeny Prigozhin. Of course, in the West, all of this speculation is presented from a well-known angle. All of this is an absolute lie.
Russia's aviation authority has said Prigozhin was on board a private jet, which crashed on Wednesday evening over west of Moscow, with no survivors. Peskov declined to definitively confirm his death, citing the need to wait for test results. Despite this, on Thursday, Putin publicly sent his condolences to the families of those killed. And spoke of Prigozhin in the past tense, saying he made some serious mistakes. Western politicians have suggested, again without evidence, that Putin ordered Prigozhin to be killed in order to punish him for launching a kitchen mutiny. Russian investigators have opened a probe into what happened, but have not yet said what they suspect was the point of calling the sky. Nor have they officially confirmed the identities of the 10 models recovered from the wreckage. British military intelligence said on Friday that it is highly likely that Prigozhin is dead. The Pentagon is saying its own initial assessment is that Prigozhin was killed.
Hey, hallo, wat twee stappen hier. Eindejaarsmanager bij PostNL met weer een tip speciaal voor jou. Wist je bijvoorbeeld dat 7% van de pakketten vertraging oploopt door slecht leesbare verzendregels? Eens meedenken. Ah ja, kerkuil 826. En dat probeer ik nu op te lossen met wat versterking. Want onze machines kunnen niet alles lezen, omdat niet alles even lekker leesbaar is. En zorg er dus voor dat je verzendregels altijd scherp gericht zijn. Dus niet te licht. Die kan je nog even meekijken. Deze klinkt een beetje. Ja. Buren op de rug 127.
Ah, maar weer man.
De automatische verzendlabel altijd de grootste zijde van de verpakking. Vermijd te laat of liggen en plak het label altijd rechtsbovenin. Dat zorgt ervoor dat je barcode al maar 1 keer zichtbaar is. Op die manier kunnen we nooit een verkeerde barcode scannen. En dat schiet jou onnodig niet. Wij kunnen wel gelijk snel zorgen. En dat zorgt voor meer tevreden klanten.
Met de interieurs van Ponte wonen maak je het thuis meteen gezellig. Ponte wonen, verrassend gezellig.
Russia's quasi-news outlet, which has posted sources in the law enforcement agencies, has reported that investigators are focusing on a theory that the war in extra bombs may have been planted before delivery.
Here's what the thoughts in terms of what exactly is happening in the aftermath of Yevgeny Prigozin's death. We're being joined in by Mr. Glenn Diesel, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway, joining us live from Oslo. Now, Mr. Diesel, this is something that is going to be talked about for a very long time. What actually resulted in Yevgeny Prigozin's death? There are questions that are being raised about whether he's even dead at all. But the fact is, Vladimir Putin has now offered his condolences. But is this a case where Yevgeny Prigozhin was done in because of the mutiny that you'd staged against the Russian forces 2 months ago? Or do you think that this was actually an accident?
Well, it doesn't seem likely to be an accident. It's too big of a coincidence, I guess. So the speculation, of course, goes around. Some arguing that it was from the Kremlin, others argue there was perhaps some rogue elements in the Russian government, others pointed to the United States, others looks towards Ukraine, or simply some of the enemies that Prigozhin built up over the years before, well, effectively the Kremlin pulled a lot of his protection. While of course there would be, based on opportunity, it would make a lot of sense to point at Russia. And also some arguments that points against it. For example, this was done in the middle of the BRICS meeting, which was immensely important to Russia. They did this on the territory of the Russian Federation, which was very public death instead of having him disappear or die in Africa. And and also this happened at the eve as Wagner is returning onto the battlefield in the war. So it's also a very strange time to disorganize and create so much chaos within the group. So it is a mystery, but again, I haven't excluded any possibility yet.
Now, what happens to the Wagner mercenary group per se? Because it was such an important strategic asset for the Russians, not only for the fact that it was fighting in Ukraine, but also because it's so actively involved in other theaters of conflict, such as in West Africa and even in Syria.
Well, I think they're going to keep Wagner because it's like private military companies have a lot of benefits. They bring in a lot of special expertise and specialization. They have flexibility. They also have reduced risk of casualty because they're very specialized. Also, they're more politically acceptable casualties as they're simply working in a military company as opposed to someone who's conscripted. You know, it's resource saving. Sometimes they even make money when they're working abroad. And the best of all, of course, is plausible deniability. If Russia would have to use them to, for example, do an attack against, limited attack against Poland or another NATO country, they could be quite useful. So they will want to keep them, but they transfer so far most of the heavy weapons away from Wagner and a lot of the ammunition because they simply became too powerful and too unreliable. So this, again, would be the disadvantage for private military corporations. So I think they're going to look to reform it, new leadership, not so centered only around organization, possibly more loyalty towards the state, effectively overcoming some of these disadvantages which we see with private military corporations.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Diesel, for joining us and giving us all those details.
My pleasure.
All right, now, give us more insights in terms of what exactly is happening in the aftermath of Yevgeny Prigozin's death. We're being joined in by Mr. Glenn Diesel, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway, joining us live from Oslo. Now, Mr. Diesel, this is something that is going to be talked about for a very long time. What actually resulted in Yevgeny Prigozin's death? There are questions that are being raised about whether he's even dead at all. But the fact is, Vladimir Putin has now offered his condolences. But is this a case where Yevgeny Prigozhin was done in because of the mutiny that he'd staged against the Russian forces 2 months ago? Or do you think that this was actually an accident?
Well, it doesn't seem likely to be an accident. It's too big of a coincidence, I guess. So the speculation, of course, goes around. Some arguing that it was from the Kremlin. Others argue there was perhaps some rogue elements in the Russian government. Others pointed to the United States. Others looks towards Ukraine or simply some of the enemies that Prigozhin built up over the years before, well, effectively the Kremlin pulled a lot of his protection. Well, of course, there would be, based on opportunity, it would make a lot of sense to point at Russia, and also some arguments that points against it. For example, this was done in the middle of the BRICS meeting, which was immensely important to Russia. They did this on the territory of the Russian Federation, which was a very public death instead of having him disappear or die in Africa, and it was, and also this happened at the eve as Wagner is returning onto the battlefield in the war. So it's also a very strange time to disorganize and create so much chaos within the group. So it is a mystery, but again, I haven't excluded any possibilities.
Now, what happens to the Wagner mercenary group per se? Because it was such an important strategic asset to the Russians, not only for the fact that it was fighting in Ukraine, but also it is so actively involved in other theaters of conflict, such as in West Africa and Indian Pacific.
Well, I think they're going to keep Wagner because it's like private military companies have a lot of benefits. They bring in a lot of special expertise and specialization. They have flexibility. They also have reduced risk of casualty because they're specialized. Also, they're more politically acceptable casualties as they're simply working in a military company as opposed to someone who's conscripted. You know, it's resource saving. Sometimes they even make money when they're working abroad. The best of all, of course, is possible deniability. If Russia would have to use them to, for example, strike to an attack against Poland or another NATO country, they could be quite useful. So they will want to keep them, but they transfer so far most of the heavy weapons away from Wagner and a lot of the ammunition because they simply became too powerful and too unreliable. So this again would be the disadvantage for private military corporations. So I think they're going to look to reform it, new leadership, not so centered only around the organization, possibly more loyalty towards the state, effectively overcoming some of these disadvantages which we see with private military corporations.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. DC, for joining us and getting us all these details.
My pleasure.
The time to pay attention to the outbreak story that we are tracking on beyond, and this, of course, is what is unfolding in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's almost 550 days since the war broke out, and the casualty count only seems to be rising with each passing. Ukraine is its ante in the war, and Russia continues to defend against scores of drone attacks that Ukraine is carrying out as a part of its counter-offensive. Remember, Kiev had warned in the month of July that it aims to return the conflict to Russian territory. Russia says that it has shot down 2 Ukrainian drones over its Belgorod region, and another one which was headed for Moscow. It also intercepted a drone near the Russian capital. Until now, Moscow had not been on the target list of Ukraine, but of late the capital city has in fact come under a string of drone strikes and continued shelling, especially in key areas such as Eurozova, in which about 6 people have been injured. The Russian cities in the border often face continuous shelling from the other side. Russian officials have accused Ukraine of using cluster ammunition in the recent attacks. The United States has supplied cluster ammunitions which are banned in more than 100 different countries. It also has dispersed a large number of tiny bomblets from a rocket, missile or artillery shell that scatters them in mid-flight over a wide area. This is what your cluster ammunition actually does. Ammunition that the United States has been sending to Ukraine of late. On the Ukrainian side, a missile hit a cafe near Kupiansk in Ukraine in northeastern Kharkiv region. 2 people were killed and another one was injured. The Russians increased the frequency of attacks in the region with an aim to capture it back. And the Ukrainian officials had urged residents living near the town to evacuate. Russia has claimed advances in the region, and Ukraine, remember, had recaptured this area just last year from the Russian occupation. Last week, Russian shelling had resulted in the death of an elderly woman. Ukraine has been struggling to regain its lost territories and to break through the heavily fortified Russian positions.
to the updates from the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia has reported fresh drone attack on Moscow on Saturday. Russia says it did shoot down the drone. However, the attack has again prompted a temporary shutdown of all 3 major airports in the capital, which has been hit by consecutive days of drone attacks lately. The fresh attacks on Moscow comes the day after Russia said it intercepted 42 drones off the Crimean Peninsula. This was one of the biggest coordinated Ukrainian air raids yet over the Russian-controlled territory. Though not confirmed by Russia, Ukraine's intelligence officials say that the drone attack hit a Russian military base deep inside Crimea. Russian emergency services say that there was no damage to civilian infrastructure from the drones, but some residents have reported casualties in the attacks. Meanwhile, Turkey's foreign minister was in Kiev on Friday. He met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, during his visit, the Turkish minister said that the Black Sea grain deal must be renewed. Remember that the deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations had allowed the safe export of Ukrainian grain. However, Russia quit the deal last month and ended it. Turkey's foreign minister says there is no alternative to the original deal.
It is a priority for Turkey to renew the Black Sea Grain Deal initiative. The initiative has an important place for world food security and other humanitarian efforts. In this regard, our President is carrying out a very systematic work. Through discussions and exchange of ideas continuing with a large group of factors, including Ukraine, the UN, Russia, Europe, and the US. I don't want to spend time on details here, but our efforts will continue. I hope we get a good result.
Now, the United States has also confirmed that it will start training Ukrainian pilots to use F-16 fighter jets next month. The advanced aircraft had long been sought by Ukraine. President Joe Biden spoke with Zelensky on Thursday regarding the training. The US says the training will involve several pilots and dozens of personnel for maintaining the aircraft. Last week, Denmark and the Netherlands announced that they will provide F-16s to Ukraine when the country's pilots are trained to use them. And most recently, Norway has also said that it would give the fighter jets to Ukraine.
Separately, the Department of Defense is announcing today that the United States will soon begin training Ukrainians to fly and maintain F-16 fighter aircraft in support of the international effort to develop and strengthen Ukraine's long-term defenses. Following English language training for pilots in September, F-16 flying training is expected to begin in October at Morris Air National Guard Base in Tucson, Arizona.
These moments last forever.
Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine is also expected to be in focus of the upcoming G20 summit in New Delhi, which will not be attended by Russian President Putin. US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, said that it is expected to have an agreement on the issue in the summit, except from a couple of countries. He says that most countries have condemned the aggression, which is beyond geopolitics. He says India shares the desire for peace as soon as possible and will pay.
The mystery behind the Russian plane crash, which was reportedly carrying Wagner to Yevgeny Prigozhin, still continues to puzzle the world. He's the same man who led a meeting against Kremlin just 2 months ago. Multiple speculations are going round on how this crash happened, but there are no concrete answers. Kremlin has dismissed all the speculations that the Wagner chief was killed on its borders. It has labeled them as absolute lie. Many Western leaders and commentators have been claiming that Prigozhin was killed because of his rebellion against Putin. This includes assessment by the Pentagon. However, Moscow has still not confirmed Prigozhin's death. They still referred to him in the past. Kremlin spokesperson, while denying all the accusations, said, and I quote, when covering this issue, all of this is an absolute lie, and here, when covering this issue, it is necessary to base yourself on facts. There are not many facts yet. They need to be established in the course of investigative actions. This is Dmitry Peskov, who is a spokesperson of the Kremlin. Well, our Russian investigation committee has opened a probe into the plane crash incident. All 10 bodies have been recovered, but the investigators, however, have not been identified yet. Investigators have also found flight recorders at the crash site. The committee says that detailed examination is ongoing, with all necessary measures being taken to determine what happened. Kremlin says this probe will determine what happened, and no accusations should be made before all facts are out. Meanwhile, an ally of Prigozhin, as well as Putin, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, spoke about the incident. He said he urged Wagner leaders to stay in Belarus and not leave for Moscow. Remember, it was Lukashenko who helped defuse the crisis between Wagner and Kremlin 2 months ago. Wagner fighters are now in Belarus to train Belarusian special forces. After the failed mutiny, he asked Prigozhin to watch out for himself and not to go to Moscow owing to death threats. This is Lukashenko. However, Lukashenko has also denied Putin's involvement in the crash. He says he does not know what happened, but cannot imagine Putin has fallen because of his death, as Putin is very calculating and calm. But the Belarusian leader has said that Wagner fighters would remain in the country as of now. Meanwhile, the on-ground fighting between Russia and Ukraine continues. Kyiv has now said that Russia is regrouping after shattering and suffering heavy losses in the eastern of Ukraine. Commander of Ukraine's military ground forces says that regrouping is to increase the level of combat potential and resume offensives. In this view, forces have pledged to promptly take all measures to strengthen their defenses on the threatened lines and advance wherever possible. So this is the latest on the crash that apparently claimed the life of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. And the details are still scanty, but the information will be gathered and we'll be telling you all the latest updates from the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, is the latest one to weigh in on the different theories for the death of the Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin in a plane crash northwest of Moscow. Conspiracy theories are going around all the world, and some of them are pointing the fingers directly at the Kremlin. However, Moscow has denied all allegations and has called the theories of an attempted assassination as absolute lies. The Belarusian president has said that he warned the Wagner chief about possible threats to his life. Alexander Lukashenko further added that he had insisted that the Wagner fighters should remain in Belarus, and Putin's longtime ally had said that the Russian president is unlikely